This podcast is not sponsored or supported by any business or organization. The views reflected on these podcast episodes are my own. Please be aware I am not a medical expert, travel agent, or any other kind of expert. Hey everyone! Welcome to the Eat, Explore, Love podcast. I'm Ashley. This podcast is based off of my blog of the same name, Eat, Explore, Love. It talks about the unique challenges in traveling around the world when you have celiac disease. Due to sort of popular demand, I decided to also record a podcast to delve a little deeper into my travels and the lessons learned along the way. On this episode of Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast, I am chatting with adventurer Jennie Milton. She is probably going to be one of the most inspiring folks I will get to speak with on this podcast, as she discusses the struggles she's had to overcome, but turns those lemons into something even better than lemonade through her camps, speaking engagements, and visiting elementary schools. Please be on the lookout for her children's book, Gayle and the Red Kite of Courage. The links to Jennie and the services she provides are in the show notes for this podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Hi, Jennie. Welcome to Eat, Explore, Love, the podcast. I'm so excited to have you and to be able to speak with you today.
Hi, Ashley. Thank you so much for having me. I'm also so excited to be chatting with you.
You have, just even before we started recording, I felt like we could have just taken off to the races, and I had to remind myself, slow down, record. You have such an amazing energy. So I'm super excited for this conversation. I always start off by asking my guests, who is Jennie? Could you give me, in your own words, your background? Because I could do all the research in the world, but I don't want to leave this to assumption. I want to hear who you feel that you are.
Sure. Well, let me start by saying, G'day, mate. My name is Jennie Milton and I'm from Australia. I grew up in Australia in an incredible family. My mum and dad had a sports store from when I was born. So my brother and I are so lucky to have spent our childhood skiing in the winter, sailing in the summer, and being exposed to all these different sports. I came over to America, to the USA, for my 30th birthday to go heli skiing in Alaska, and that trip changed my life forever. And I fell in love and ended up becoming a US resident, and this is where I'm calling home these days.
I love that. So, what inspired you to want to make that move over to the US and become a US resident?
Probably love. I would say is the biggest thing that tends to make us want to make such a big change, like changing countries. My initial my initial dream and goal was to come to Alaska to go heliboarding. And that was always a dream of mine. I'd seen it in all of the latest ski and snowboard movies, the incredible mountains were calling my name. I really wanted to go there, ride those mountains, and leave beautiful tracks down places that had no names. I had all these dreams on my bucket list of seeing polar bears in the wild. And what I didn't realize when I planned these goals and dreams, I knew I'd have amazing adventures. I always planned on going home. I didn't realize that I would actually fall in love with the lifestyle that came
Oh,
along
wow.
with this incredible environment. And these women that I met that were living up in Alaska, and they weren't just talking about it, they were doing it. They were out there in the mountains every day, living in a harsh environment, and some of them were living without heat or running water in the winter time, and chopping their own wood. These women were badass. really, and
Yeah.
I wanted to be badass too. And so I was very drawn to spending as much time as I could in the US. But the moment that made me really question did I ever want to go home was the first time I got to fly a kite up in
Mm.
Alaska. I'd gone there to heli ski, which is great when the sky is blue and the powder is white. But when it's stormy conditions, it's very windy, the helicopter can't fly. We do what's called down day activities. And I'd met this kind of sexy heli ski guide, and he and I'd have some conversations. We were both into wind sports. I'd mentioned that my dad taught me to sail, and I'd been a windsurfer from a young age. And this other guy, Steve, he was a windsurfer also. And we started finding things in common. And I said, well, after I leave Alaska, I'm going up to Hawaii to have kiteboarding lessons. That was the next thing on my bucket list. And I had a kite with me, and he said, well, I've got some kites too. I'm learning to fly them on snow. Do you want to come and try that? And we both went out there and flew our kites, and we got the first taste of what's called snow kiting, which is using a kite to tow you around with your skis or your snowboard on. And I fell in love with the concept of this brand new sport we were discovering. And I also fell in love with that sexy heli ski guide, Steve, and he's now my husband of 16 years.
That's
So
nice. Love that.
it was
That's what
it
a happy ending.
I like to say it was love at first sight and love at first flight. And of course, I wanted to spend as much time with Steve as I could. And we did the long distance relationship for probably about 6, 7, 8 years until we eventually got married, and I made more of a permanent move here.
I love that. I also love, as part of your story, it's different than what I'm used to hearing, which is folks wanting to come and experience. If they're wanting to come to the United States, it's usually New York or California or Colorado or very on the mainland, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I love that you are like Alaska and Hawaii, the two places that are not quite what would be considered mainland United States, which is incredible, and that your journey through travel is through these extreme sports. So and also sports that are not super popular. For I'm a native New Yorker, so not super popular in my culture and how I grew up, because it was all about football and American football. So and or soccer and football for those that are American listeners over here. So was it that always the main goal of Eye on the Prize? It was Alaska, Hawaii, and being able to do those activities, and everything else was secondary, or was that just the first accessible place for you to be able to go and travel to?
Great question. And I love that you call it the mainland. Up in Alaska, they call it the lower 48.
I
is,
like
it,
that.
is that
Yeah.
their terminology, the lower 48 states?
Yeah.
Growing up as an athlete, both my brother and I mentioned we learned to ski when we were about 2 or 3. We sailed, we windsurfed, we rollerbladed, we skateboarded, and anybody that sort of gets passionate about their sport is always looking for those ultimate locations that have those ultimate conditions. Now, I love my skiing back
Mm.
home in Australia, but we don't get that waist deep powder, and I don't have those big pointy mountains that you see up in Alaska in those videos. And so Alaska became the ultimate location to go skiing and snowboarding in my world. And there's certain locations. Hawaii was the ultimate location to learn how to kiteboard. Well, now I'm talking the early 2000s. I think it was 2003 when I went to Hawaii and had that kiteboarding lesson. And really back then, it was the only school or credible school I could find for learning how to kiteboard. So it just seemed like the right place to go in order to learn my sport safely. And these were the locations that had these ultimate conditions. And Australians love to travel. I'm sure anybody who travels, you're going to find Aussies everywhere,
Yep.
and especially Aussie skiers, because we get to
Mm.
ski in the opposite season to you, right? It's wintertime back home now. All my friends are skiing in Australia. We have snow from June till October. And so it's very easy to be able to ski in our winter. And then, of course, during our summer Christmas holidays, it's winter in the Northern Hemisphere. And so we can travel to go and ski. So it tends to just be something that athletes, skiers, do. We travel to do our sport, and that's what we're looking for in a location.
That's incredible. And I love your perspective on travel because, like I said before, it's very different from mine. And when I'm going to go and travel, I'm going to come across people that have the same interests that I do for obvious reasons, just like for you and your circle. So I love hearing a different perspective on all of it. Part of Eat, Explore, Love the podcast, part of what I talk about is the lessons I've learned throughout my travels. And in my research of you, the things that stood out to me is you've been through some intense stuff, which makes sense with the activities that have inspired you to want to travel. What are the biggest lessons that you've had to take along the way in your travels through those? I guess we could call them health scares, right? Is that a fair way to describe them? Could you take us through that journey? Is that okay?
Sure. I've had so many lessons. I don't even know where to start, Ashley, because there's been so many lessons learnt.
Mhm.
And during my time of traveling, of course, we have a lot of incredible experiences, but the more time you spend away from home, the more time there is for something to go wrong. And of course, I've had
Yes.
injuries while traveling. I've had illnesses while traveling and had to deal with those. And I'm actually going through a really tough time right now. I've recently been diagnosed with brain aneurysms. And
Oh, I'm
for
so
people who don't know what a brain aneurysm is, I didn't either when the doctor told me. It's where the arteries in your brain start to expand because there's too much blood pressure against those walls that are too weak, and they start to balloon. And
mm,
unfortunately, most people discover they have brain aneurysms when they rupture and they have a stroke.
mhm,
So,
mhm.
although this is a really sad and scary time in my life, I feel like the luckiest girl on earth. And I'm so grateful that we found these aneurysms before they ruptured. And I've got a great chance to have these aneurysms repaired in order to have an exciting future of adventure, to come. Now, when these things happen while you're traveling, I think the biggest lesson I would love to share with people is a lesson that my dad taught me. And thank you, Dad. He's not with us these days, but I love sharing his lessons with people. It keeps his memory alive. And his biggest lesson when I started to travel at a young age was, Jenny, you must have travel insurance. and, and this was something that I know Australians, we all know we need travel insurance. Medical attention, especially in the US, is very, very expensive if you don't have
Mhm.
insurance. And I'm not sure if the Americans, have a dad like mine, really giving them a bit of a kick up the butt to get insurance before they travel too. And so I've always had travel insurance, and that has saved me so many times. I can't tell you. Um, Up in Alaska a couple of years ago, I blew my ACL skiing. It's the most common injury for skiers, and I thought I was going to get through my lifetime without it. But I'm a real skier. Of course, I had to blow an ACL when I was up in Alaska, and they were unable to even do an MRI in the town that I was at. And so all of a sudden, I had to
Mhm.
travel while injured. I had to get to the big city of Anchorage. I needed to get MRIs, and I actually ended up having my surgery in Alaska rather than going home to Montana or home to Australia to have my surgery. It was pretty important that we did it sooner than later. And I
Mhm.
found a surgeon in Anchorage who was approved by the US ski team. I thought, oh, that's a good sign, and I went ahead and had my surgery in Anchorage, and that all ended up being covered buy my travel insurance, my operation, the hotel that I had to stay in, the transport to get there. And I can't, can't thank World Nomads enough for, really honoring what they offer. Sometimes when we take out these insurance policies, you never know whether they're really going to pay up when something goes wrong. And I know my husband, spilt a glass of water over his brand new Apple laptop, and he had a he had a deductible to pay, but they helped him replace his laptop. I've damaged kites out in the field, and they've helped with that too. So travel insurance is one of the biggest lessons I really pass on to people if you're traveling, especially when you're doing sports, because the chance of injury is much higher.
I also feel like that's got to take, and does that cause you to be a little bit more trepidatious the next time you want to go and travel? How have you learned to overcome that? Or are you just born this way? You don't know how you do it, it just happens. You're just able to do it.
Great, great question, Ashley. And anybody who looks at my Instagram page goes, "Oh my God, she's just born without fear," and that is so not the case. Because seriously, when I was a little girl, I was the biggest scaredy cat in my class at school. I was the biggest scaredy cat on my street. Was not born this way, but I love to share the lesson of slowly building confidence and courage. And once
Mm,
we find, something that really challenges us, that puts us out of our comfort zone, something that we're scared of and we really want to run away, with the fight, flight, freeze response. I was always into flight. I always wanted to run away. And skiing, I think, is one of those sports that really helps us build our confidence and our courage towards fear in a very organized state. If we go to a ski resort, you start off on the green runs, right? And they're the beginner runs, and they're very, very low angle, and we learn to snow plow, and and we start off as a beginner. And at first, that beginner run is so scary. Eventually, we're bored and we're like, okay, let's go for a blue run. Let's challenge ourselves. And we go to that blue run, and all of a sudden, ooh, there's a few bumps around, and the runs might be narrower. And we really need to develop our skills in our sport to handle the upgrade of those challenges. But we also need to upgrade the fitness of our minds as well as our bodies. And so being able to overcome those fears, and eventually you get up to those black runs or the double back diamond runs. And for me, I challenged myself until I got up to those really big mountains up in Alaska. And every time you set yourself a new goal, which is just outside of your comfort zone, it really, you feel the fear. And that's a natural response. It's not that I don't feel the fear, it's that I feel the fear and I get excited. I go, okay, I'm scared. My adrenaline starts running. They don't call me adrenogen for nothing. I love that feeling of feeling that adrenaline going, and it's super exciting. It's hard to tell sometimes the difference between the feeling of fear and excitement. They're very similar body responses. We start to sweat, we start to shake, we start to get nervous. But the feeling of overcoming that fear and dropping into that black run or dropping into that mountain in Alaska, and the feeling afterwards is so much better than the fear feeling that you had before you actually did it. Boy, that's what builds self-confidence. That's what makes us proud of ourselves for doing something we thought we couldn't do before. And that makes it all worthwhile. And once you get a taste of that feeling of being proud of yourself and accomplishing something, that's the addiction. It's not being addicted to the fear, it's being addicted to the feeling of accomplishing the challenge that you've set yourself that you thought you couldn't do before.
mm. Is that what inspired that feeling and that process of overcoming those fears? What inspired you to? I see that you have camps that you do for women. Is that all part of what triggered that happening? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's one of the things I'm really passionate about, Ashley, is sharing these lessons that I've learned. And after I went to Hawaii for those first kiteboarding lessons, I was back in Australia a few years later. there were these women's clinics, these women's camps that opened up, and I was able to go to a couple of those, and all of a sudden I'm there, and I'm still in the learning phases of the kiteboarding, but I'm standing next to a bunch of other women that are also learning, and we were all scared together. And we
Mhm.
were all able to encourage each other to do it. And there were women that were sort of intermediate that we looked up to, that and then there were the advanced women that were actually coaching these camps. And this was such a great environment for me as a woman and the other ladies that I was with. It was such a great environment to learn. It was very different to the men up there. Go, go, go! Just do it. It was more about, we were taught about finesse and doing things step by step and feeling comfortable every step of the way, and actually learning the skills we needed before we needed them, so that when we were in that process, we already knew what to do. And that tends to be how women love to learn. And so I went to the women's camp as a beginner, and I went back the next year as that intermediate. I went back the next year, and I became a coach as well. And I got so much joy out of giving back to my sport, giving back to these other women, and it felt amazing to be inspiring these women to take these steps that I'd gotten through, step by step. So, I was only a year or two ahead of them, and they would get to where I was, but I felt like I could hold their hand and tell them, hey, I felt like that too. And that was amazing. So when I got into my sport of snow kiting, it was such a male dominated sport. I mean, skiing is a male dominated sport. I've spent a lot of time around men, and I would see the girlfriends, the wives. I'd say, "Come on, let's do it." And they would all be scared. They would have that fear of the extreme sports, and they would feel like they couldn't do it. They really wanted to run away. But once I started offering the opportunity to come and learn with a group of women like I had done, boy, all of a sudden these women started turning up, and I had these professional kiters like Colin Carroll and Sensi Graves and Michaela Pilkington that, I mean, they are so inspiring. They're the girls in these magazines that we look up to, and they came and supported me in my mission, and we were able to run these snow kiting camps and really watch these women become empowered by wind power. And we'd run inspirational talks at night. I'd make them organic food, it was all about health, fitness, building confidence, and getting emails back and reviews from these women afterwards. Not only did they learn how to snow kite and overcome their fear, they were writing back to me and saying, "Wow, Jen, it's amazing how much this empowered me to make those tough decisions at work or at home or with my family, with their families." So I realized that the lessons I was teaching were not just sport related, they were life lessons as well.
Yeah, I it's so I people can't see us because this is going to be audio only when people are listening to this. Uh, your passion for this is so exciting that I feel like I physically sat back in my chair and just took in everything of what you just said. And I love that. That's probably the thing I am loving the most about you. And no wonder that this has become successful, because you have this energy about you that I just want to sit back and listen to you and be inspired. So for you, what is the most, I'm sure, like when you're teaching, a lot of teachers say that there's students will say, oh, there was this one teacher that really inspired me. But for teachers and coaches, they say that there's always the students that inspire them as well. Is there any one particular moment in going through all these camps that sticks with you and inspires you and keeps you motivated to keep going and keep everybody going and feeling in this community?
Yeah, there is a moment, Ashley, I'd love to tell you about. And I'm just going to sort of step sideways a little bit and just move away
Yeah.
from those badass women that come to my camps. They're already great skiers or snowboarders or kiters, and not everybody can relate to that. But this year, dealing with my brain aneurysms, I've had to take a step back away from my sports. The doctor hasn't approved me to
Right.
ski big mountains or to go out there in gale force winds like I love to do. And so this year, when I went up to Alaska, it was a very different season for me. Many people would have said, "Ah, why didn't you just stay home and relax and read books?" But my husband was up there. He's a heli ski guide, as I mentioned, and he said, "No woman left behind." And so I wanted to go up to Alaska, be with my husband. It's a dangerous job that he has, and I want to make sure that I spend as much time with him as possible. But I knew that my daily routine would look very different. What was I going to do? I still so passionate about sharing my love of wind and kites with people, but I couldn't run my camps. So I made the decision that I was going to go to the elementary school in Valdez, Alaska, and I was going to
Mm.
teach these kids. I was going to stand in a classroom and teach these kids about wind and kites. And I'm going to teach them how to make a kite. And so I did the research on how to make a kite out of a piece of paper and a popsicle stick and a piece of string. And believe it or not, this kite flies really, really well. And I contacted my friends who were teachers at the elementary school, and all of a sudden I'm booked into classes. I've got 150 kids to teach
Wow.
over a
Yeah.
couple of weeks, which was so incredible. And so I would go into this classroom, and I would put on a slideshow and start teaching them some fun facts about wind and about kites to get them all excited. And that was fantastic. I wanted to make sure I was educating. And then we would make these kites. And the kids would make the kites, and then they would decorate them with crayons or markers. And then we would fly these kites. And these kites were amazing. They actually fly indoors if you run around. So my apologies to all those teachers that like to keep their kids quiet and not run around, because I had kids running and screaming and running around the classroom having an absolute ball. But
Yeah.
the story I want to share with you was after one of those classes, I went to the supermarket to get my groceries. I was wearing a hoodie that says, "I love kites" on the front. And this lady came up to me and said, "You must be the lady that taught the kids how to make kites today at school. I
Oh,
need to
wow.
share. I need to share this story with you." I said, "Yeah, please, please." And she said, "My daughter is really depressed. She's having a really hard time in life. And I've picked her up from school every day this week, and she's been in tears. And as a mother, it's just
Mm.
devastating to see my daughter in so much emotional pain. But
Mhm.
today I picked her up from school. She ran up to the car with the biggest smile on her face, flying a kite, and said, 'Mummy, Mummy, look, I'm flying a kite.' And she had so much joy. And this mother had a tear in her eye. She wanted to thank me so much for giving her daughter joy. And it really made me realize, look, I'm getting a bit teary as well, because that was just such a powerful moment for this mother to
Mm.
share that with me. It made me
Mhm.
realize that I'm not just teaching these kids about wind, and I'm not just teaching them how to make a kite. I'm sharing I'm sharing joy. And the simple act of going and flying a kite really does give us so much joy. And I had other messages from parents saying, "Normally my kids get home from school and all they want to do is play computer games, but
Mm.
today they came home and they had a kite. All they wanted to do was go outside and fly their kite in the
Mhm.
wind." And again, that's such a beautiful lesson that I get to share with people. And that's why I really love kites, and the wind is my best friend.
That is a beautiful story and even better than what I could have hoped for when asking you that question. So thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. I know that one of the questions I could ask you is what's up next, but is this a time of self-reflection and learning how to slow down for yourself a little bit and take care of you and put you first in this time that you're going through, or are you already planning for the next set of adventures and next set of students that you're going to teach? How has that well, hold on, let me back up a second. Has that classroom situation set up a different path for you career-wise and what you want to do?
It has, Ashley, and I love that question, and that's a question I ask myself on a daily basis. There's,
Mhm.
orders from the doctor to be resting and giving my body time to heal, and but
Mhm.
I also feel like something as scary as brain aneurysms and brain surgeries and the possibility of having a stroke really made me question, how long is my life? And
Mm,
and what do I want to achieve before my time on this planet is finished? And I really
mm.
feel like that I haven't had a chance to share all these lessons. I haven't had the chance to give joy to as many little girls as I would love to give. And so it has sent me down a new path,
Mm.
of doing something at home to keep me quiet and being creative, but still sharing my love of wind and kites with others. And so I've started writing children's books. And my first book is coming out soon, and I'm so excited. I had tears in my eyes yesterday when I got the
Yay!
illustrations back from this incredible artist who's doing the illustrations, because all of a sudden this vision of me writing a children's book is coming to life, and seeing those illustrations, and it's a true story based on my childhood. It's all about Gayle and her being sad and then finding the joy of flying a kite. And I'm dedicating this book to my
Mm.
grandma, who's turning 100 this year. So I'm turning it into a
Wow.
very special gift for my gran, and also a way of me, you know, leaving my stories and leaving a legacy. Someone said to me recently, where is the most knowledge? Is it in a library or the graveyard? And I
Mm.
thought about that for a second, and everybody in my class had the same answer. There's more knowledge that's left in the graveyard, and I didn't want to be one of those people. I wanted to make sure I shared my stories and left the lessons that I'd learned so that they could help others. And that's what these books are really giving me the chance to do.
I don't even want to ask you another question because I feel like that's such a powerful place to leave this. So I think for our large, big conversation, I think that's a beautiful place to leave that and for people to reflect on and think about and be inspired by you. I'm inspired by you. I want to go and figure out how to. I have some things that I have to think about in reflection of this conversation. So thank you. I also, but as silly as it is to end this way, I ask all my guests the same rapid fire question. So Jenny, is it okay if I ask you those questions to close this out?
Yeah, go for it, Ashley.
Perfect. So my question for you is, where, in your opinion, is the city with the best food?
The city with the best food, I'm going to say my hometown of Canberra in Australia. It's the
Ooh,
capital city. And the reason why I say that is because Australia is really made up of so many different nationalities. And so we
yeah.
have great Indian food, we have great Thai food, we have we have great Italian food, because there's so many different nationalities. I mean, even in my own family, I have Chinese blood, German blood, English blood, so many different nationalities. And I really think that's one thing people don't think about when they're coming to Australia, is just how good the food is and the variety. It's incredible.
Yeah, I love that. I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to go for it anyway. Do you prefer a vacation that requires you to be active or relax?
Active, easy question.
Yeah.
I've got to have an adventure every day, maybe 2.
And then where is the city that you learned the most about yourself?
The city I learnt the most about myself would be Valdez, Alaska. And it's a small town. I wouldn't even call it a city. There's not even a traffic light in this town. But the people that live there have taught me really who I want to be. The mountains have given me that powerful mindset that I'm so grateful to have today. And the town of Valdez has really provided me with the loves and passions of my life.
I love that. And then the last question that I'll ask you, where can people find you? Because I'm sure they're going to be inspired and want to connect with you somehow, some way. So, where can the folks find you?
You can find me at my nickname Adrenogen. It's like Adrenaline Jen. And you'll find me at Adrenogen, my website, Adrenogen on Instagram, on Facebook. And I did something we're not supposed to do recently, and that's to Google yourself. And I put in Jennie Milton, my name, into Google, and it was amazing how many stories and stories about my camps, websites, podcasts, different articles in magazines. So if you'd like to learn more about me, please do that, and reach out if anyone would love to talk about kites, courage, fear, or how I could help you or come and speak to your team on a stage or an event. I would love to be there to share more stories with you. And thanks again, Ashley, for the chance to share my stories with your audience.
Amazing. And all the links and things that you mentioned will be in the show notes in the description of this podcast episode. So we'll make it nice and easy for people to find you. So thank you so much, Jennie. This was a pleasure being able to meet you and speak with you. And I can't wait to continue following your journey and get your children's books when they come out.
I would love to. And hopefully, Ashley, you've got the link to my children's book in there. I didn't mention the name of the book. Can I do that
Yeah,
quickly?
yeah, of course. Yeah.
So the name of my children's book is called Gayle and the Red Kite of Courage. Gayle's named after gale force wind, and it's an amazing story about a little girl who finds joy in flying a kite. She finds a community of other like-minded, wind-loving friends at a kite festival. And the last line, I'll leave it there. The last line of the book is, "A good gust of wind can turn a sadness storm into a rainbow of hope and happiness."
I love that. And you'll have to send me a signed copy. We'll have to negotiate that offline because that's beautiful. I love that. Thank you so again, Jennie, so much. Can't wait to continue this conversation and follow your journey. Thank you again. Wasn't Jennie's energy just simply incredible? I hope you walk away from this conversation as inspired and jazzed as I did. Jennie is simply the best. Thank you for listening. Till next time. Thank you for joining me this week for all the fun journeys and lessons learned on my big adventure called life. For more information on the different cities discussed, check out the blog posts on hieatexplorelove.com, posted every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you have any questions or fun stories to share, feel free to reach out at hieatexplorelove@gmail.com. Until next week, remember to eat well, explore the world, and love yourself. See you next time. This episode is produced, scripted, and edited by me, Ashley. Special thanks to Sarah Mientka.